just want to acknowledge that this seminar is being held on the traditional lands of the Gubbi Gubbi people, who we pay respect to, elders past, present and emerging. And of course, I want to welcome everyone to the Pacific Seminar Series with the Australian Centre for Pacific Islands Research. Today, we are fortunate to have Tiitii and Dr. Libby Swanepoel, who will be sharing some dialogue from the field about embracing strengths and voices to co-design a gender-inclusive seaweed program in Samoa. ACPIR has been working for more than 20 years at the Samoan Fisheries Division in the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, holding a position of Principal Fisheries Officer in charge of inshore coastal fisheries and aquaculture sections. ACPIR completed her Master of Science by research at UniSC, focusing on seaweeds, particularly Halamenia, also known as limu awa. I hope I got that correct. In Samoa, ACPIR has a keen interest in restoring traditional use and cultural values to seaweed, also known as limu, as well as evaluating the nutritional benefits of Halamenia to the usual diet and context of Samoans. Dr. Libby Swanepoel is a dietitian and public health nutritionist with the Australian Centre for Pacific Island Research, based at the University of the Sunshine Coast. Libby is interested in understanding how aquatic food systems can be leveraged to improve nutrition and livelihoods, and gender and social inclusion. Libby has expertise in nutrition-sensitive agriculture, where she places nutritionally rich aquatic foods at the centre of overcoming the triple burden of malnutrition. As an applied researcher, Libby works to understand the diversity of protein, fibre, micronutrients in farmed and wild harvest seaweed for human application, with current projects in Samoa, Kiribati, Fiji, Indonesia, and Northern Australia. Libby's work is couched in participatory action and embracing the strengths and voices within communities to bring about sustainable change. Please don't hesitate towards the end of the seminar to ask whatever questions you need. And if you're new, now I won't take up any of your time and I'll pass you over to Libby and ACPIR. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amy. Hello, Talofa Lava. Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to be joined by my wonderful colleague, Samoa Tiitii, today, and we'll be talking to you about a process that we followed over the last couple of years to co-design a gender-inclusive seaweed program in Samoa. Samoa's got her camera off because she's hotspotting from her phone at the hatchery at the moment, but she's going to pop her camera on at the end and you'll be able to ask questions too then. Thanks, Amy, for providing an acknowledgement to country. I'd also like to acknowledge the Gubbi Gubbi or Cubbi Cubbi people and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, as well as extending our welcome and acknowledgement to our sister country, Samoa, and acknowledge their connection to land, sea and community and the tradition of their knowledge and resilience as well. All right, so today we're going to provide a little bit of a background to the broader project that we're talking about, as well as talk about appreciative inquiry, which is the theoretical framework that the process we've followed has been embedded within. And that may be new to many, maybe not our social scientists in the Zoom room, but maybe some of the natural scientists. And then we're going to talk through the process that we've followed and interject with reflections from ACPIR and myself along the way, and then finish up with talking about what the implications of this type of process to working together is and what the next steps might be. So I'll pass over now to ACPIR, who's going to tell you a little bit about seaweed in Samoa.
Talofa lava and good afternoon, everyone. In terms of value of seaweed in Samoan culture, in the Pacific Islands, including Samoa, it faced considerable developments and health challenges such as the climate change, food insecurity, and malnutrition. We know that gender inclusive, nutrition sensitive agriculture is an avenue to address these challenges. And one food crop we have been interested in, particularly in Samoa, is seaweed or limu. And why seaweed? Seaweed has lots of benefits. Firstly, it's considered a sustainable food source, what we call a no-feed crop. So it has minimal inputs, doesn't need things like fertilizer, and if harvested sustainably, it continues to grow and give back to the ocean ecosystem. It's highly nutritious. There's over 10,000 different varieties, but typically seaweed is high in vitamins like B and C and minerals like zinc, iron, and iodine, and also a good source of healthy fats, and in some cases, protein. We also know that it's inclusive. Seaweed work can be done by the whole family, including women and children, and in many parts of the world, women are the leaders in the seaweed industry. Lastly, as well as being low cost, so affordable for families to buy or clean in Samoa. It is a traditional food and has a place of cultural value. For example, it is being used in ceremonies or as a gift to relatives or village people, as well as church congregation. Over to Libby.
Thanks, Saupeti. So the way in which we approached this project from the beginning, even before we started back in the design phase of it, was really couched in decolonizing our efforts. We are strong in our participatory research approach, so co-design fits really nice in this type of approach because it contests what power structures might be. It's really collaborative. It's all about bottom-up engagement and thus aligns with constructs of decolonization. So within globally how agricultural research for development is working, we're seeing shifts in how projects are designed and delivered towards more inclusive and horizontal partnerships, which is what we've worked towards here with working with communities from the bottom up. So in this project, we followed a participatory approach to co-design a gender inclusive seaweed program. And the goal was to support Samoan communities to collaborate in the planning and the management of seaweed activities across the whole village level. So within our project, there were different roles or teams. There was the research team, which was made up of the Samoan team led by Saupeti, USC, which it was led by me, as well as the other collaborators from University of Canberra. I see Barbara Pamphilins joining us today. So Barbara was a big part of the research team as well. Then we had the math staff, where Saupeti acted as the conduit between communicating between the broader research team, her staff, and then the community. And then, of course, the community on this same horizontal line, where predominantly in this part of the project, we were working with villages across Savai'i, and we piloted in one village in particular that was Vaisala. So our work was couched in participatory approach, which I said, and we really used appreciative inquiry to guide this, which is all about embracing the strengths and the voices within the community, but also within the research team and the institutions, recognizing that all voices have strengths and assets to bring. So by involving people in the co-design of the program that shapes their life, we were hoping that would build ownership and sustainability of the program as well as its outcomes. So with appreciative inquiry, there's 4 different phases to that. And we're going to talk through the project based on those 4 phases. So first of all, you've got the discovery phase where we uncover what is good. This is a strengths assets based approach. Secondly, the dreaming phase, which is all about the vision and goal setting. Thirdly, designing, and that's where we're building on that understanding from phase 1 and 2 to co-create actionable solutions. And then lastly, in the fourth phase is about the doing or the delivery. So this slide shows you a little bit more detail, those 4 phases and what we actually did as part of those. So as we move through the presentation, Samoa and I will share details of what happened at each of these different steps and our reflections on the strengths and some of the constraints to working using this type of an approach. So first up, under Discover, it was all about understanding the community. So we might, elsewhere you might term that as a needs assessment or a needs analysis. And even though the Australian team had worked in Samoa previously for 5 or so years, those projects were really technically based. So we didn't have a strong focus on villages or people in the past. So for us in Australia, it was really important for us to spend time virtually immersing ourselves in Samoan culture to understand that village level cultural context and the social structures. We also used a process of photo elicitation during gender disaggregated focus groups to understand the needs within communities. During the dreaming phase, we engaged in a series of virtual exchanges and we used the discovery findings from the understanding the community phase to be able to build what the need was, build that understanding of what the need was and set the vision. During the design phase, we co-developed the program and modules, and this took several months of lots of going back and forth via email and virtual exchanges, and then a final co-design and capacity building workshop in order to refine the program to be reflective of village needs. And last of all was the delivery phase, which involved building capacity of MAF facilitators to implement the program, and then the culmination of the final pilot in Vaisala village. So I'll move over to phase 1 now, where Samoa is going to tell you about what that discovery phase actually looked like.
Yeah, in phase 1, it was about discovering the best of what is in Samoa in relation to men and women's involvement in seaweed work. Firstly, it was important that the research team had a good understanding of Samoa, as 3/4 of the research team are not from Samoa. They are based in Australia and they are Australians. For the research team, this involved lots of open conversation to learn about each other's cultures, reading and research on Samoan culture by the Australian team. And also we were fortunate that Libby had been to Samoa before, and I have lived in Australia for 2 years. So we had some live experience of each other's countries and cultures too. For those who are not familiar with Samoa, I'll now take a couple of minutes, share a little about Samoa with you. And Samoa's population from 2016 census is about 195,000. We have 10 islands with 4 inhabitants. The largest one is Hawaii, where the village fishing team pilots was taking place. And Upolu is about 75% of the population is resided, with the capital of ACPIR. Both have commercial and open businesses. So Samoa is also a volcanic origin. It has a lush rainforest vegetation. Samoa is also unique in the setting up of a village with a Samoa or the Famatai, or the traditional Samoan way of life. So it's, as you can see, it's Famatai refers to the social chiefly system, where in the top of the triangle, the blue triangle on the right-hand side from where I'm facing, it has a village council, and that's the top of the hierarchy within the village. And there's a village mayor, which is a representative from the village council, and it's the voice of the village to the national government. And then below that, we have a women's committee where it's consisted of wives of Matais, as well as the daughters of the village and wives of untitled men. And then on the other side, it consisted of untitled men. And in a family, in a typical Samoan family, it's headed by a Matai or a chief. And that underpins values and culture of a traditional way of Samoan culture, where it has an authority and a power. You know, it has a decision where it has joint decision making, and it also have the love and the compassion and the respect, you know, for the family as well as within the village. So these were the cultural and the social values that we took into consideration before we go into implementing the project activities. Next. So to understand the roles of women and men in seaweed work, we used the photo elicitation process as well as the focus group discussion, where we go into a community or a village community and have both men and women in a separate groups, so that we'll be able to hear both gender voices and opinions and their perspective on seaweed farming and seaweed work within the community. So the context and the setting of the activity was across 10 villages in Savai, and it was held in October and November 2021. Fortunately, there was also a seaweed project through the UNDP. It's a Japanese supplementary fund through the UNDP in Samoa, implemented by Fisheries Division. And the project, the UNDP project, was mainly on the aquaculture side of seaweed, where we are going to launch our seaweed hatchery in the next 2 weeks. So we used that project to complement the activities from this project, so that we save our time, we save the community's time, because sometimes we experience in Samoa that if you go in the village, you know, too many times in 1 month on the same topic, you know, it might confuse the community. So the participants of this work, there were 135 people, aged 18 to 84 years old, and both and all gender were involved in this activity. And as you can see in the map, you know, that's the map of Savai Island, and the villages, the 10 villages are written in white labels, and that's how it's scattered around the Savai Island. And the picture at the bottom is the women learning the new seaweed farming method. Next. So these are the photos from the photo elicitation and group and focus group discussion. The photo elicitation activity, you know, had photos of both men and women doing various tasks across the seaweed value chain. And the men and women used these photos as prompts to discuss who in their village does, or their roles and their activities. So our team facilitated this activity. Then also we did the focus group discussion to unpack the enablers and barriers that men and women face in engaging into the seaweed work. These are preliminary findings in terms of the roles of both men and women. And so what did we find out? Firstly, we saw that there are 2 seaweed food chains. The first being the existing seaweed chain from wild cleaning, and secondly, the chain for the farming of seaweed, which was the new inshore method being introduced, or aquaculture method. About half of the villages were already cleaning wild seaweed, and some were well known for selling it. But for nearly all the villages, the farming method was new to them. So the photoelicitation method was helpful in enabling them to visualize what their roles could be. So in terms of the types of roles or the division of roles across the chains, what we found was not unexpected. We found that men were dominant in the first part of the farming chain, in particular the aquaculture activities. Women and girls, on the other hand, were perceived to have a more significant and lead role in later stages, so as the processing, the marketing, and preparation or cooking. And lastly, an aspect to also highlight within this is the traditional role of women in seaweed work in relation to the wild cleaning. A couple of villages described the passing down of traditional knowledge from their mothers and other women in the village. And one group shared how back in the day, women were the only ones who were responsible in harvesting and production of seaweed. This was because most of them were saying that women can do better than men. So the second part was the focus group discussion about the enablers and barriers to do seaweed work. And this process gave the voice to the community so they could identify needs and the problems in order to be able to come up with possible solutions and ways to better engage in seaweed work. So for this part of the discussion, villagers mostly focused on the new farming method. So there was a strong emphasis on the future needs or those key inputs needed to farm successfully. One of the main inputs discussed was the need for the overall governance and responsibility of seaweed at the village level. And in general, this was viewed to occur within existing social village structures or the farmatized system or the Samoan traditional way of life. Mentioned on the previous slides, in the farmatized system, the village chief and council, which made up of title people, usually men, are the main decision-making body for the village, and seaweed was viewed to fall under the council's role. So this is an informal institution might present barriers for some women in terms of equal involvement in village decision-making, access to the reef and other opportunities. For example, some women described how they needing permission from the council to access the reef, especially the villages under the community-based fisheries management program. But we also saw that there is a desire to work better together for both men and women, and working together was often talked about in the context of enablers as what would make the farming a success. From experience, Samoa is mostly work better as a community, communal activities. Other key inputs needed included a need for skills and knowledge, particularly the new farming and harvesting methods, having time and people to do the work, as having competing obligations and other villages and home responsibilities was a common barrier. The need for materials and equipment at the outset, this one is closely linked to financial supports needed acquire these materials and other identified lack of money or not having how to seek external funding as a barrier. Then lastly, in terms of outputs, these were discussed less, but there was an emphasis on a need for sustainable practices to conserve seaweed as a resource. Also, the fact that outputs were less discussed highlighted to us that there is a need to raise awareness and build capacity of the value chain beyond growing and harvesting activities. So the strengths, phase one reflections. The strengths is mostly the process gave voice to the community to identify needs and solution. The photo elicitation allowed participants to visualize the future of the unknown. As you may aware that dealing with fisheries resources is dealing with the unknown. Piggybacking off the UNDP project worked really well, where the two projects and processes complemented each other. For the opportunities, the process that enable Australian team to gain better understanding of the Samoan culture, and for math staff, where we build our capacity in qualitative research, data collection and analysis, and also the use of internet to collect most of the work. The photos of the women and female math staff is an advocacy of for gender inclusion, as most of my team are ladies. Yeah, so that's what we have been put forward to the communities when we invited them to participate. We also invite them, we emphasize to the village mayor to please include women in the participation of their village. So some of the challenges that we faced is the interference of the wind when we do the audio recording, as well as the balancing work priorities for math staff, finding time to transcribe alongside with our other priority works. And for constraints, yes, the time consuming, the process of engagements, you know, with the COVID-19 restrictions, we really need the Australian team to be here to, you know, to assist us and give and provide their expertise on the site. But those were the constraints that we faced.
Thanks so much, Sapeti. Okay, so we just took a deep dive kind of into understanding community strengths and needs to be able to set out what to do in the dreaming phase. And the dreaming phase really just looked like a series of virtual exchanges. So we used the phase 1 needs analysis, the findings that Sapeti just spoke about, to be able to figure out what areas of capacity building we needed to focus on and identify target groups within Samoa based on social equity and those being most in need. So this second phase was all about visioning. It was built into the project design and was revisited as we progressed through the project as well, just to make sure that we were staying on track. So first of all, we determined what the areas of focus were by building on those learnings from the focus group discussion that Sapeti just spoke about. Some of the strengths that were really obvious to us were the collaborative nature of Samoan culture and Far Samoa. Other strengths were whāmatai and the role of the village council in fishing management that was existing and strong and working really nicely. The including women in decision making was already existing, and both men and women identified that to achieve success, we need to work together. So in terms of achieving gender equity, there were lots of ticks and assets already in place here. So then there were some specific skills and knowledge needs that we wanted to address, such as the farming techniques, the sustainable planning and practices that were spoken about by villagers, understanding what those diverse opportunities across the value chain can be, as well as the need for that overarching governance and the strong protection mechanisms. So from that initial determining of focus areas, we brought in our alignment with math and Samoan government priorities, as well as aligning with other strategic documents. So the SPC gender report had just been released, the Samoan community-based fisheries management program, and then the village fishing management plans that sit under that, which really encompass Samoan customs and traditions. We also then needed to align with ACPIR, so the funding body has various strategic priorities, including gender, which we wanted to pull in. And then lastly, the vision for this whole program was built upon the PNG family farm team's approach to capacity building. So this is a program that's embedded in adult experiential learning, which has been really successful in PNG, but it's in land-based farms where people work in family units. So we knew that it was going to look different, but it ended up looking quite different. So we aligned the family farm teams with Samoa village structures, and then needing to adapt and take that whole of village approach as well. And this concept also underpinned the next phase, which was the design phase. So our reflections of this dreaming phase in phase 2 were really around the strengths of leadership and visioning, and that really shone through. This came down, these are my reflections, this came down to Ulusapeti, who is just such an incredible leader in the fisheries space and advocate for women all over. So our project was one of several that MAF were involved with at the time, which slowly emerged as Ulusapeti gives you little dribs and drabs of inside intel. But she's just has an incredible ability, like the icon here shows you, of juggling so much, but also recognizing the each project's specific needs and making sure that they're met, while strategically directing and shaping each project to contribute together to what the bigger picture or the bigger puzzle will look like. So our project, along with others such as the UNDP project, we all complemented each other, which was a real asset. We weren't just kind of standalone projects working in silos. So the timing of our project was serendipitously aligned with the UNDP project so that they could piggyback off each other. Another strength is relationships and trust, and the existing relationships and trust, as well as the time that we invested over so many extra Zoom conversations, which probably did slow us down not being able to be there in person. But luckily, Samoans and Australians seem to share the same sense of humour, so that really helped to build trust, and then that open communication flowed more easily. In terms of opportunities, phase 1 allowed the voice of the community to be heard, which means that this was included in the visioning and dreaming. And that really embodies that bottom-up approach that we're striving for. We didn't experience this challenge ourselves, as we had the luxury of being somewhat flexible and agile, which is one thing that COVID did give us, was that ability to be able to pivot and be more agile. However, I do imagine that if priorities of different parties and partners were mismatched, then this dreaming phase would probably look a little bit different. So after the dreaming phase came the design phase, and this is where we were actually designing the seaweed program. So this flowchart here shows a snapshot of the process that we used to develop the modules. It looks really logical and linear, but it wasn't. It was a very fluid process, and it took more than half a year to work through this process. So we learned a lot about how best to communicate as we worked through the co-design component. The lesson here is that the actual design phase, it doesn't occur in one workshop. You can't take one program and adapt it on paper and expect it to fit and be adopted and embraced by a community. So we had loads of different activities and discussions and decisions all happening concurrently, especially in steps 3 and 4. This was a collaborative process that we kept building on the modules and ideas in order to refine them. So I'll unpack each of those a little bit further. So in the first step here, the village fishing teams, it's a set of training modules, but it's more about the participatory approach of working with villagers. It's about a process to engage villagers, to enable them to identify what their own strengths are and enable the village to work together as a team to be able to plan further development of their fishing and aquaculture activities, depending on what they prioritize as being most important to them. So So the areas of focus were determined, which all came out of phase 1 and 2 of the co-design process. Then we defined learning objectives to address the barriers that were identified, skill and knowledge gaps and other things identified during that dreaming phase. The short-term learning objectives, just to tell you a little bit about what the program looks like. So there were 4 learning objectives of the village fishing teams. The first was around gender inequality and gender issues. Second was nutrition benefits of seaweed. Thirdly, the uses of seaweed as livelihood. And then lastly, skills in collaboration, including communication, decision-making, planning, goal setting, that sort of thing. So after that, well, kind of at the same time as that, there was lots of back and forth discussions between the research team in Samoa and Australia to understand the cultural nuances of Samoa and the best way to approach the development of the program. And it was through these discussions that we were drawing on community feedback and the community-based fisheries management program, what processes were already in there. And it became pretty clear that the program needed to be delivered as a whole of village, as the social unit, rather than as the family unit, like in family farm teams. So as well as this, we were discussing things like how to make the program asset and strengths based, building on what's good rather than taking a deficit approach. And so that's where this pic here of our friend with a basket is depicting, is that we really wanted to communicate that everyone comes with a big basket full of knowledge and experience, and it's not about tipping out that basket and putting something else into it. It's about working together to fill the basket up with even more and new tricks and new tools that can be added to your existing basketful. So in the third step, once we defined what those objectives were, we arranged them under 4 different modules, and each had that overarching aim. And then activities were developed to sit under each of those modules. So in developing these, lots of the activities came from family farm teams, and they were quite relevant and slotted over nicely, but they just needed some tweaking to be more specific for seaweed farming, for starters, as well as Samoan culture. We did develop new activities to better support what that collective nature and kind of decision-making processes that already existed were. And then that first iteration was drafted by the Australian side of the team, which took us quite a few months. And while it was kind of led by the Australian team, it was constantly in communication with ACPIR to test our ideas and what assumptions that we were making. And then aligned with phase 2, all of this was underpinned by that Samoan way, like the community needs and the village kind of fishing practices. So then from there, we further refined and customized that draft to become the final set. So this was via lots of email exchanges with the principal fisheries officer, input into how to align activities with community needs better, drawing on local knowledge, cultural nuances. The activities were refined again, and then the ultimate iteration of the drafts were what we based for the 2-day co-design workshop, and that's where we properly fleshed out the program. We tested everything, we refined the activities, as well as developing a schedule for how it was actually going to be delivered over the 2 days within the pilot community. So on reflection, having an existing program with a similar theoretical underpinning really helped us. But at the beginning, it was hard to constantly challenge and remind yourself that one size doesn't fit all. The whole point of this was to make it appropriate for Samoa. So you're constantly challenging and revisiting your assumptions, and that's where the team was really useful with that. So there's a high level of reflexivity, flexibility, were really important. And they're attributes that our whole team have, and we recognized that we needed to keep on working on those as well. So again, having that kind of trust and relationships with the team helps to speed that along nicely. The opportunities that we recognize from the process were the potential for scale up and further opportunities for capacity development of math in this style of community development approach. Challenges. So initially in our program project plan, we'd proposed doing this in 10 villages. And obviously COVID slowed things down for us, and COVID's given us this cushioning to be flexible and to revisit what we were planning to do. But really that was a very ambitious target, and it was just such a relief to be supported in pulling this back to just one village and really being able to do it properly. Other challenges to this is that it is a fluid process. So there's no formula, there's no recipe. We're presenting one co-design process. It worked in our experience. That doesn't mean that it's going to work elsewhere. And it's a really comfortable space for social scientists to be in, but we recognize that ambiguity could be more challenging for other scientists. And then lastly, if we could have traveled and been together in person, I think that the process would have just been so much easier and I imagine speedier as well. So at the end of this phase, we had beautiful drafted modules that needed to be trialed in a village, and that's what phase 4 looked like, the delivery and the evaluating of village fishing teams. So I'll hand over to you, Sapeti, to talk about that, which has only just happened, which is exciting.
Thank you, Libby. This is the final phase of the VFT, and it's around delivering and evaluating the village fishing team pilot program. So for the pilot, we held it in 2 days in the village of Vaisala around September this year. We accordingly joined the team, and we traveled to Savai to carry out the pilot study. The village of Vaisala is located in Savai, and it's about 20 participants that attended the first day, 14 men and 6 women. And on the second day, we have 21 participants, 14 men and 7 women. And all village groups were represented. So village groups in terms of the village council, the chiefs, the women's committee, as well as the untitled men. And the activities was facilitated by our team after many virtual training on how to read the modules and also go through the modules and activities before the workshop. And the VFT pilot was held through workshop style, more like a classroom kind of style in our office at Savai, one of our office stations in Savai. Yeah, next, go. Yeah, so those are the examples of the completed activities, and having it in a workshop style, like this setup style was also suitable, to the purpose of this activity, for the village participants to focus and concentrate on the workshop objectives and modules to achieve set targets of the village fishing team pilot study. And as you can see, like all of them, like we math staff, we're just facilitating it, but the participants were actually doing everything, the write-up in flip charts, and also during the presentation. As you can see, the picture on the top there, where an untitled man was giving a chance by the village council to present on their behalf. And it was I think the setup was really suitable. it doesn't really give the hierarchy kind of treatment to, you know, everyone. All the participants were the same. So that was the advantage of the setup we had. So even the designing of the map, you know, the village maps, and then they draw out their calendars. You know, they were all working together, even with the women. And when they presented, the men asked questions and vice versa. So it really comes down to the activities came down to a shared action plan where they put down what's the next step, you know, incorporating all what they have discussed, you know, into an action plan. And also they also identified the role of fisheries to be able to incorporate this into the existing village fisheries management plan, because Vaisala is under the community-based fisheries management program. So it was a really fit for purpose style that we had. Then we evaluate the pilot, and we also evaluated the program during and after the pilot, because we wanted to know if the program was meeting the community needs. And also we wanted their feedback to improve and shape the program for a rollout to other villages. So in terms of the learning outcomes, the program achieved what we were intending. Firstly, the VFT presents the nutritional and health benefits of seaweed in Module 1. Many participants were not aware of this, and the feedback was that this was a really important learning outcome for them. And this was the thought that we got, you know, in day 1. And then in day 2, we prepare day 1's night, we prepare a presentation that really shows the nutritional benefits of seaweed. And then we were able to present it on the day 2. And this was the feedback from them. For nutrition and health, many participants also shared they learned new things about the value chain, and that the program had opened their eyes to new opportunities that seaweed could bring to them and their village. We saw that the program had supported men and women to work collaboratively. Over the 2 days, we observed the men recognizing that women play a huge part, the roles of women in seaweed post-harvesting, as well as seaweed farming. The activities in the pilot open up the recognition by men, the importance of the women's role in seaweed work. Even women didn't realize or recognize their own roles. So going through the activities supported women to see and recognize their roles within the seaweed activities. So the design of the program, including how the village was invited to participate and creates a supportive environment for the inclusion of women. And the activities also gave women a voice and confidence to share their views with the men and chiefs when they are around, which is not a thing to happen when you are in the village setting. So the program also reinvigorated the participants and their village interest in Limu, and there was lots of positivity around the potential of Limu to benefit their village and families into the future. Lastly, the program provided the math staff with new skills and gave them confidence to deliver these types of programs in the community. And this was being discussed amongst our staff that photo elicitation and village fishing teams would be really good components to incorporate into our community-based fisheries management program facilitation process. And beyond the pilots, in terms of where to from here for the program, there were a few things from the pilots and evaluation that were highlighted to us. The VFT was like a continuation of needs analysis. Going through the activities identified further needs, including tools and materials like snorkel gear. The evaluation and the program highlighted the need for ongoing support and training, where we can't put people in the driver's seat if they don't know how to drive. So we need to support them, and MEF and USC need to have an active role in that. Incorporating seaweed planning into village fisheries management plan as part of the CPFMP is an important step to enable ongoing resources and support by the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. Recognizing that inclusion also extends to other minority groups such as the untitled men. The format of VFT teams allowed for this, whether it's already been mentioned, and also the intentional approach by MEF staff to make sure or ensure that untitled men and young ladies were able to contribute throughout the conversation and the discussion, and also what the deliberately held it at MEF office. So for phase 4 reflections, the strengths, we've seen that flexibility and adaptability will be being able to update the program. As I've already mentioned, we've seen that there's some gaps in day 1, and then we'll try in day 2 to fill it in. The delivery of the workshop at the MEF office, also broke barriers for all gender to be able to participate, and for all the groups, the village groups, to be engaged in the discussion. It also demonstrates the capability and the competence of the MEF staff to deliver this type of activity. The high engagement of participants was also observed, where we've seen women can really speak in front of the chiefs when they are around. And also, Australian team members were able to be in Samoa for the pilot, which is a strength for us to have, an expert on the side to turn to when we don't know what to do during the pilot study. So the opportunities is to implement this into our existing CPFMP, and the village is also ready to implement their plan, which is a very good opportunity for the village. The challenges, of course, the COVID has already been mentioned, that where we rescheduled and prioritize our activities to suit the time. And the staff changes, most of my team are new recruits, and they have the capability to catch up and and I've also shared information through presentations in the communities for them to aware and learn from, have some knowledge on seaweed. And challenges is also seaweed is a new or different way of farming, and VFT is also a new way of working with the community, using the photos, using the modules. They were, oh, well, how come you're doing, all this? And then I told them, you see this Palangi lady, meaning Courtney, she's here, and everything, they like with the new generation, everything you have to document. So, you have to share your knowledge and your perspective, so that everything has to be documented, so that we'll be able to show the donors, to show our partners, the numbers, how do you feel? And then they will be able to analyze it and put it in numerical. So, and so it was really good to be there, So, and the constraints, the resources were in English, and it took us, I think, most of our time to try and translate it. Samoan to English and English to Samoan. Yeah, so those were the constraints we had, and uncovered additional needs in terms of schools, which requires financing outside the scope of the project to meet, you know, some miscellaneous needs.
Oops. Thanks, Sapeti. So that gives you not a snapshot, but a pretty detailed overview of the 4 phases that we followed during this co-design process. So what were some of the strengths that we want to draw on, and the tensions that we experienced that we needed to navigate? We had lots of strengths. The relationships we've already talked about. So being able to build upon them further in this co-design process was great. We had that high level of trust and communication, including the active listening that were crucial to our approach. Time was actually another strength for this project, because we recognize that not all funders support the time that's needed to conduct a thorough and authentic needs assessment, let alone the level of dialogue exchange that's required for true co-design. So we're really grateful that was recognised as a key output for this project. The strong female leadership in this project, having Sapeti to be such a clear advocate for all parties, is a real asset. And I think that we need to invest in developing these skills and attributes more in women in other fields and other countries in the Pacific. And Sapeti is just such an excellent ambassador for this. Reflexivity was a real strength. But I've got to tell you, I'm quite a reflexive and reflective person, but this was challenging when your assumptions and preconceptions keep emerging and you don't want them to. You don't want to have those assumptions, and just being aware of that, I think, is the first step. So there were great assets that we built on in the project, but that juggle still remains. It's tricky balancing priorities. We struggle with needing to document everything and be accountable to disseminate our findings. And often it's just the tangible, countable things that are valued. And we need other mechanisms, I think, for recognizing the value and impact that can be communicated through our reporting and dissemination avenues. So did we achieve what we set out to do in kind of undoing development? I think we have a long history of colonisation, and we can't really expect to undo this in a 2-year project. But I do believe that this approach to co-design enabled us to slow down, to reflect on the way that we approach development, and it definitely takes positive steps forward. We approached this project with a real willingness to be creative and to be integrative. Sapeti and I have both spoken about the importance of reflexivity, and that particularly so for researchers who are coming from a place of privilege. So if we truly want to take a decolonist approach, then we need to be alert to power. And the first step is for us to acknowledge that. So I guess on that note, I want to thank you all for giving your time to hear about our work. Just a few acknowledgements, particularly the amazing Samoans who participated in various phases throughout this project. Sapeti and her team at MAF, who as technical fisheries scientists, they've been pushed out of their comfort zone to work in the community space. ACR's support, and Barbara Pamphilon, who's really walked this journey with us to enable us to take her family farm team's approach and adapt it into the program that's true to Samoan fishers. And lastly, I guess all of my team at USC, and especially Courtney Anderson, she's just embraced this way of working, and pretty much none of this would be here if she hadn't been holding up the everything that she's done, including going to Samoa for me. So she's been pretty great. So on that, there's a minute left before we're meant to finish the questions. I'd really love to hear your feedback, as I'm sure that our team would. I don't know if we're allowed to hang around, Amy, but if we can, we'd really welcome some discussion and questions.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody has any questions and a bit of time up their sleeves, and go for it.
Let me stop sharing this. Bring us all back together.
Libby and Sapeti, I don't have a question, but more of a comment. So I thought I'll just sneak it in there before somebody does jump in with some questions. I think I'd like to thank you both for that presentation. It was really informative. And for me, sometimes I find it difficult to follow along with stories. And I felt that an observation from your presentation today was that you gave us a story where you covered everything. And I had no what if this or what about that, and how did you come to this and why did you do that? So I actually don't have any questions because I feel that you really shared every step of that process with this project, which was really awesome. So well done to both of you and Courtney and everyone else on the research team.
Thanks, Bridget. And thanks for letting us have a whole hour in order to do that.
I think it's a good sign when you take the whole hour, and we're still here.
Yeah, you're still, most of you are still there.
Yeah, yeah. So, and we've still got a few people online as well. So I will let other people ask any questions if they've got them now.
I had just a quick question, sort of going back to what, well, I can't remember if it was Ulusapeti at the beginning when you were talking about women's roles in seaweed. Where are some other places that you're aware of where women are quite heavily involved in seaweed production?
Where in the world, do you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, everywhere, Amy. So all seaweed producing countries are predominantly women's work. 80% of seaweed work is done worldwide by women. So that's Philippines, Indonesia, Africa. It really is a commodity that lends itself to those who of all genders and abilities as well. So people with a disability can be involved in different points, as well as different ages and those sorts of things. So I think you'll see everywhere it's largely dominated by women.
Yeah, so it's a really accessible sort of line of work.
Yeah, definitely.
That's great. Does anyone else?
I should have about 10 questions. Sorry. Oh, sorry, I don't need to turn my speaker on. Yeah, but I'm only going to choose like one. I've literally written like 10 questions. But I suppose just really quickly, I just want to, I don't know if you already mentioned it, but, or I feel like it's an obvious question, but is it something that they were already eating, that Samoan people were already eating anyway? And you just expanded on, like built it as a commodity. Is that correct?
I'll let Sapeti answer that one. She's probably had some for brekkie.
She's still here.
Melanie, did you ask whether we already, like Samoans already consume?
Yeah, was there something that was a everyday kind of food already?
No, it's, yeah, we consume the seaweed, but it's not an everyday kind of, like, it's not a staple food, shall I say? To, like, we don't consume it every day. And from my research, like most people will purchase seaweed, you know, like to as a gift,
All right.
you know, to take to hospitals, you know, for sick people, you know, to take to the elderly. But it's not something that they will consume, like taking taro or crop.
Right.
You know, or rice, you know, it's not staple like that.
Yeah. And so sorry, just one more quick. The end consumers, like when you in your project, did you, I don't know if it's Libby's question, help like work out the end user, like help them sort of?
Yeah. So we did talk about the whole value chain, and it's up to the village. So part of the process is the village identifying who they see the end consumers being. So for many of them, it was for family consumption, but also, you know, this particular village is close to a hotel, so there's that avenue that it could be able to, once tourists start coming and eating more, that it could be an avenue to supply hotels. There is a market. There are roadside vendors and those sorts of things. So there are lots of opportunities, but yeah, it's really about those short supply chains and the village identifying where they want it to go as well.
Can I ask one more thing? Sorry. And is it, what depth is it? Like, is it a species that would normally already exist there, or did you put? And I was just wondering how deep it was. Like, is it amongst the coral, or is it sort of snorkeling depth or diving depth?
Yes, it's a native species, and for sea grape we have 2 species, you know, in Samoa, and both islands, Savaii has both those 2 species natively grown. So it's native to Samoa. But just to add on to what Libby had alluded earlier, you know, this project and how we provide the information through the VFT, it was very useful because people are not aware of the nutritional benefits, you know, of seaweed. And what we were trying to put across to them is to look at the seaweed, how they look at cabbages, tomatoes, you know, look at the vegetables. So that was the message that we were trying to put forward to our local communities, not just to buy it as a, you know, as a gift to take to, they take it to the sick people, but they should consume it prior to getting sick. You know, so those were the messages then and information that we were trying to put forward to the communities.
Thank you.
Vicky had
Libby. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, go.
Hi, Libby. Hi, Ulusapeti, Tiitii. My name is Alita Sinclair, and I'm tuning in from the Pacific Labour Facility. Somehow the link to this very great research ended up in my email, so I thought I'd join in, and it's really fantastic to hear and also see the work that you guys have done with limu. As Tiitii mentioned, it is a delicacy in I guess in Samoa and Samoan culture. But I think my question is, because I've also been following UNDP and the work they are doing in regards to limu conservation, around limu conservation, I think my question is, moving forward, will there be continuous capacity building for the villages, for the locals, especially our rural villages, on the importance, as mentioned already by Tiitii, the nutrition side of the limu and of the project, but I think also the impact of it on the environment, most specifically the oceans, especially when you're harvesting them, because it takes special skills to actually harvest the limu. So how, you know, I guess I can want to know, how are the capacity of our local communities are being built in regards to the scientific side of things, and the impact also on the corals?
Yes. I'll start, Sapeti. Thank you so much, Alita C, and thanks for joining us. I love that we get new people, which is great. So that it's certainly, we recognise the sustainability was a big thing that came from villages as well, the need for sustainable management and sustainable harvesting practices. This type of program, because that was designed within it as something that was identified from community as well as from in-country, that was woven into the program. We see that the program can fit within the village fisheries based management plan, which means that it sits then under the community-based fisheries management program. And that's something that Sapeti and her team, she can talk to you further about it, but Sapeti and her team support villages at the village level under that program to be able to continue their engagement in this sort of way. And it's really exciting for us that the community type engagement and the having village fishing teams, you know, be able to be rolled out to more villages. It is time consuming, so I can't imagine that it's going to happen straight away. And I don't know if we've got any friends from ACR still here, but ongoing funding would certainly help to support the rollout more broadly. Yeah, so I think that in terms of nutrition and climate resilience are two priorities for us as well as for the village, and we do have ways in which we're hoping to keep that rolling. So Petty, did you want to add about the village plans and CBFM?
Yeah, thanks, Libby. So far, as I mentioned, the UNDP project and how it complemented this project. UNDP was focused on the aquaculture side, and for this project, we were looking at you know, the nutritional benefits, and also engaging gender into the process. For so far, we've done 10 trials of farming trials in Sava'i and 10 farming trials in Upolu, and it came out successful. So during that program, the UNDP project, we introduced the farming system. We demonstrated how to farm, how to set up the farm. And then we also went out when it's time to harvest. So the whole process was completed. And we also have TV advertisements on the TVs and all other sorts of media. So now we are bombarding with with requests from communities. You know, it's for us to be able to assist and set up their farms. So the capacity is already out there, but like Libby was saying, you know, we need more resources to expand it, you know, to other areas of Samoa. And with the setup, with the construction of our seaweed hatchery, you know, it really a continuation and the sustainability of these projects to be able to fit in with our CPFMB program. So hope it answers your questions.
Thank you. No, thank you both so much. I think, again, I just want to congratulate you both on the work that's been done. I'm from Sava'i myself, so I'm definitely willing, and I'm definitely very supportive, you know, because I know our people need to really be aware of these things and the value of these resources I have. Also, I must congratulate you both on in the inclusive of women. Yeah, that's my final comment. Thank you.
We have time for, well, I mean, if you ladies have time, we've got one more question, just from Vicky, which I just thought was a fantastic question. I don't want it to get missed. So she was just wondering, what's your key advice to other researchers or other teams that are keen to adopt a more collaborative or participatory approach in their future work?
Oh, that's a great question, Vicky.
I know, I had to
Yeah. So we could tackle this from a few levels. I think from an individual level, we need to be more reflective ourselves, and especially coming from that place of privilege, we need to acknowledge and recognize the power dynamics that exist. And once we recognize that, we're in a better place to be able to have that conversation with our partners. I think at a broader level, I think the Australian development agenda is a long way to go. I see that it's still quite deficit focused, and we need to be advocating for more of a strengths focused, asset-based approach to the way in which we do development, and hopefully that can filter through in how projects are put into place. You know, I mentioned in this project, we really did have the luxury that this style of working together is a key outcome. So we have the time to be able to invest in exploring ways of working together, but a lot of projects don't have that luxury. So if when we're pitching for projects, we can write this type of approach into the design of the project, then that'll support us being able to do it as well.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I guess we're past time now, but thank you so much, Samoa and Libby, especially for donating some, even past and over an hour. I guess what I really appreciate is that you've gone to this project from the foundation of wanting to decolonize a lot of the research and a lot of the work that's being done. And you've really taken a genuine approach to co-design. I really liked how you have given such a great outline of appreciative inquiry. And I think the whole process, what it really highlighted to me was that you really valued lived experience and brought that into what you were trying to do. And then also you created such a supportive and collaborative environment, just from the beginning with the photo elicitation. And then, overall, you just highlighted the strength of the Samoan community and what they really do have. And hopefully, in future, we can see more projects that bring that sort of approach to communities that need them. And that's all I have to say. So thank you so much.
Well said.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks, Samoa.
Thank you.
Are you happy to share
Barbara.
slides with me? Oh,
Yes. Yeah, slides, please.
Yeah.